All right, guys, today we're going to start off talking about a few couple vital things to know in Photoshop. We're starting at exactly the same place that we left off on. So if you're coming from our previous video, going through non-destructive editing and things like that, you are good to just jump right into this one. I've changed absolutely nothing about this file. So we're going to start off talking about layer blend modes. There is a little presentation that is going to be on Canvas that references this in case a video isn't your speed or you want to just double up on whatever it is we're talking about. So first with layer blend modes, of course, you need to have layers for these to really function. And I think the best way to demonstrate layer blend modes is honestly maybe to turn off or hide some of these layers that I've added on top with our stickers and to just go in and disable the layer mask I did at first. Um, you don't necessarily have to do this to work with layer blend modes, of course, but this I think is the best way to maybe show you guys what they do and how they affect things. So I'm going to end up hiding those layers effectively. They are not in play right now, as you can see. And I'm going to go in and add one blank layer on top of these pairs. What I want to do here is pick a color that is going to be giving us the most noticeable change. Maybe not something I would necessarily do or put into play in a collage that I would end up turning in, but just to show you guys how it works. I'm going to pick a really kind of aggressive shade of electric green, and I'm going to fill the entire layer with that. So again, just a blank layer, and where we're at right now, I'm just going to go over to the fill bucket, or I could go up to edit, fill. Both of these are going to work in exactly the same kind of way, and I am just going to click to fill that bright kind of eye melting shade of green. What I want to do next to access all the different layer blend modes that there are out there is I want to go to my layers panel. If it's closed, again, you just want to go up to window and navigate down to layers and make sure that it's active. On my layer panel over here, I want to go up to the very top and you'll notice there's a couple things. We talked about opacity before and how that slider is going to make things more or less transparent. I'm going to not mess with my opacity for now, but I want to look at this menu that is to the left of it. And it's going to just say normal at first. These are going to be your layer blend modes. So if I click on this little caret menu down here, make my opacity no longer highlighted because that's going to annoy me. Normal. As I navigate through these, the nice thing about Photoshop is that it's going to preview all of these layer blend modes for you, and these are the blend modes we're looking for. So as I navigate down through these, we have normal, dissolve, which doesn't look like it changes much, darken, multiply, color burn, linear burn, darker color, lighten, screen, color dodge, linear dodge, add, lighter color, overlay, soft light, hard light, vivid light, linear light, pin light, hard mix, difference, that's kind of fun, exclusion, subtract, divide, hue, saturation, color, and luminosity, which is also kind of fun too. So you'll notice these all react in different ways, and it's maybe hard to tell with some of these, and maybe it's exactly the color that I ended up picking, but all of these will have really slight differences between them. Sometimes the differences are quite drastic, like hopping between these two, and sometimes this example here, you're not really getting much difference at all. And that's because all of these blend modes work according to the layers that are under them. So the best example I can possibly give, or the best way of explaining it, is with multiply and then with overlay. So with the same exact green layer, switching it to multiply, like so, just by clicking on it, this is going to work with the shadows and darker tones in this image. Those dark tones will end up peeking through instead of becoming green, whereas with overlay, the light tones will be what kind of peeks through. So they all have different effects. If anyone's telling you they know exactly, aside from like guides online, if anyone is colloquially telling you they know exactly what each of these do, they're totally lying. But that's why we have the previews. So you can kind of scroll through them and pick whichever one you like. Layer blend modes like these are great to play around with color, like these examples here, where it completely is changing the color scheme in an unexpected and really fun way from the original photo. Or you can use it to unify colors in images. So maybe I am looking to take this photo of pears that had absolutely like no electric green in it before, and I'm looking to combine it with other images underneath and give it all that electric shade of green, you can do that. So layer blend modes are going to affect any layer that is underneath it. So if I bring back our stickers here that I had previously, and then I'm going to select both of them. To do that, again, our layers, I'm going to click one layer, I'm going to hold down Shift and select the next one, and then I can drag these to reorder it. Now that those two layers and the pears are underneath this green layer, with the blend mode adjusted that I just made, they're all being affected by it. Whereas before, if these layers were sitting on top, they would not be affected by that blend mode. So that's just one thing to take into consideration. I'm going to give you guys a little way around that in just a moment on how to make it affect only one thing, even if it is quote unquote on top of a bunch of other layers. But it'll affect anything underneath. So just be aware of that when you are layering things or when you're making these or playing around with these blend modes. But they're really, really fun. Maybe the best way to show also how they affect things is to have all of these different tones underneath. So sometimes these oranges and reds are poking through. Sometimes you're barely getting anything out of this. Again, the way the colors played with these two layers is entirely different. Whereas, like, I think leaving these on top personally looks better to me than the colors as they are affected by that layer blend mode change. So just stuff to consider and play around with. I really like using layer blend modes to get unexpected color combinations like this. I think this is a really fun sort of palette to be working with. But you know, it's not necessarily to everyone's taste. For some people, this also might be too severe. So layer blend modes with the screen layer selected, I can also go and adjust the opacity to change how this is appearing. Maybe something like this is more someone's speed, again, instead of it being at 100%. So I would definitely test them out. If one of these color schemes is giving you a hint of something you might like, but it's a little bit too strong, try lowering the opacity and seeing how it affects that and see if you like it a little bit more, maybe. Um, Layer blend modes are also as featured in the presentation that's going to be on Canvas. Um, there are differences between every single one of these. This green is maybe not selling that the best necessarily, but there is an example that I've provided of the same image that's been passed through every single layer blend mode, I believe with a pink shade over it, side by side. So you can see all the really subtle differences between them. And that is only going to come out with certain colors or certain, you know, tonal ranges and things like that. So I would highly suggest you play around with them. They're really, really excellent. Um, and they also work really well in tandem with adjustment layers, which is what we're going to talk about next. So for now, I'm going to hide this guy. I will bring it back in just a moment. First thing I'm going to talk about for adjustment layers is going to pertain to photo editing in general. So maybe when we're looking at our photo of pears here, before I jump into collaging more elements on top of it, I will bring back our entire layer mask that we made. Maybe these are not quite working for me. Maybe I want them to be a little bit more contrasty. Maybe I want them to be less contrasty. Maybe they need more saturation, etc., etc. There are two ways really to edit photos or the elements of photos in Photoshop using what we would think of as standard techniques, that being brightness and contrast, or you know how deep your shadows are and your midtones and your highlights. And one method is going to be more destructive than the next. So we're sort of back to our destructive versus non-destructive editing conversation here. And I'm going to show you both options because there's kind of a time and place when you might want to use one or the other. It's good to know how to use both. So first one I'm going to show is going to be maybe our more destructive method, or destructive might not be the right term, but certainly less editable option. And that's going to be, you will want to navigate. I'm just going to move my selection tool. You'll just want to navigate to your top bar of your computer up here, your Finder bar really, where it has File, Edit, Image, etc. And I'm going to go up to the Image panel and then down to Adjustments. This is where I can find a lot of photo editing tools, so brightness, contrast, levels, curves, etc. You do not need to know what these do right off the top of your head, but I would highly suggest you just play around with them and see what they end up doing. That's kind of the best way to handle Photoshop, is to just test things out and see how they react. It's a very forgiving program in that way. You can just undo it if it doesn't work out. First one I'll show is brightness contrast. This one is going to give you a little bit less freedom in editing things like contrast or other values, for my preference, I suppose. But the first tip I will always give is going to be to check on the little preview button that's going to be in all of these windows. You want to see what you're doing. If not, you're going to pull these sliders around and it's going to look like it does nothing. And the only way to see the changes that you're making is to hit OK, and then you might not like it. And then you have to fully Command Z, undo this, go back into that process and start all over again. And that can be really frustrating to not see what values you're adjusting as you're adjusting them. So check on the preview bar, and now you can see as I pull this brightness around, it's very self-explanatory as far as this one goes. The image is getting brighter as it goes up, darker as it goes down. Keeping things in 0, putting it in neutral, that is going to be your original image. Contrast, if I pull this up, more contrasty, down, less contrasty. Makes a ton of sense. The reason I like this tool less than others maybe is that it doesn't give you as much control over your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights. It is just kind of overall increasing or decreasing this value. So things can get really severe looking really quickly. But that also can be a stylistic choice. There's nothing wrong with things looking severe. I just think it's not a one size fits all kind of scenario. So I'm going to put this back at 0. The other reason why some of these methods, if you're going to image and adjustments there, might be considered a little bit more destructive or less editable than others is if I go up and move this contrast value to 50, you can also type in the values here, and then hit OK. If I want to keep editing that value, or maybe I set it to 50 and then I look at this image and I say, that is too much, I don't like it anymore. Or I'm working for an hour, and then an hour down the line, I say, this is too much, I don't like it anymore. I can't go back. And that's where that sort of history panel comes into play again. If I'm working, if I'm making a ton of clicks, eventually this brightness contrast click level that I've done here is going to move up this history menu, and then I will no longer be able to access it, and then I would no longer be able to undo it. Or again, if I'm working for a while in this and I decide I want to keep editing this contrast value, I can't get back to it without undoing all the work I did in that hour. So not really great in that regard. And that's going to apply the same way with all of these image adjustment sort of tools here, which is why it might be a little bit more destructive in terms of what we're talking about. Next tool is going to be levels. This is one that I really, really like, and I would highly suggest you guys test out and get used to the way of thinking that this tool uses. This is going to pertain to your shadows. Pulling this will darken your quote unquote shadows, your midtones here, and then on the farther end of things, your highlights. So this gives you really good control. It also has these little eyedroppers where you can select certain ranges of your image to edit that range itself, which is really lovely. It has a lot of control. I think it's really good. I think it's maybe a little bit easier to use than the next tool we'll look at, which will be curves. I think right out the gate with photo editing, this would be the one I would recommend the most for you guys to be altering things like how bright an image is, which you could do by just sliding all of these over to the right. And all of these will kind of nudge each other as you move them around. It's a really good tool. You can also hit auto and see what it recommends for you. I would not necessarily rely on Photoshop's auto tools. I think it's making this all darker because there's no background right now for it to be pulling from. I would get used to pulling around these values on your own. It's the best way of learning. But in a pinch, auto is right there too. Hit cancel on this guy and back out. Go back up to image, adjustments, and our next one is curves. Curves is kind of, again, like a photographer's tool, just like levels is, but it is a little bit more fussy, and I think the curve nature of it is a little harder to understand, but still great tool to use. It works by, this is one line, you can pop points onto the line and then pull and push them around into, again, a curve. A really common one that people like to place onto their photos is going to be this very sort of standard looking S curve. That's just going to make a photo in general punchier. A nice way also to check and see what you've done as you're doing it is to toggle your preview button on and off so you can see like what changes you're making and how severe they are while you're still making them and still in this window. Um, Next up, image adjustments, exposure. If you know anything about photography, exposure is going to be how overexposed or how underexposed. Maybe that's the best example, underexposed, your image is. So how light or how dark or how much detail you are getting in the light and dark areas. Um, if you're using photos that you found online, most likely you won't really need to be touching the exposure tools too much. I'm going to hop over a couple of these just because you can test them out on your own, but we'll talk about the important ones right now. Hue and saturation. Hue is going to let you really change the whole color gamut of all of these. This would be fun as some sort of animation navigating through these. Saturation is going to change how saturated, aka like how vibrant or bright your colors are. More on the positive side, brighter and more saturated, or you can desaturate it and it will basically become like a very bland black and white image with no tonal range in it. Lightness, darkness, those values most people know. Again, make sure that you're having your preview button ticked on for this. If you're not seeing any changes, that would be why. Image adjustments, color balance. This is excellent for those of you that might ever need to take documentation images of artwork or other things. This is how you can really quickly adjust how cool or warm toned an image is leaning. So the reason I mention documentation images, if you're used to, say, like taking a picture of a sculpture on a white background or something like that, depending on the settings of your camera or the camera on your phone, if you're not using something super fancy, your lighting and then the white background itself might come off as more cyan, blue, or yellow or magenta leaning, so more cool or warm toned. And you could basically just edit that in the other direction until it becomes a neutral, pure white kind of shade for the wall, or whatever shade of color you're looking to correct, basically, which can happen with anything. Again, shadows, midtones, highlights. Image adjustments, black and white. This is the best way to render an image in black and white. Again, here's your friendly auto button, but noticing that, I don't think that does a particularly good job of turning these pairs black and white. Personally, I would bump up the yellow slider a little bit and maybe bring down the red, just so it looks a little bit closer to our, like the color values of our innate image. Whereas again, if I hit auto, I don't think that's doing like maybe the best or most compelling job. But anyway, matter of taste. But that's going to be black and white. The other way you could render an image black and white would be to go to image mode grayscale, but that will delete all the color data, and that would be truly kind of destructive editing style. You would not be able to get your color data back. Otherwise, the next one I'm going to jump to is going to be invert. There's no real values to adjust with this. You're just hitting invert and it's going to invert all the colors on your photo. Again, can be really cool depending on what you're going for. You can also just hit Command I really quickly, and that's going to do the same thing for you. And then let's see if there's other ones to play with. People right now, really, really trendy. People love the threshold filter. If you're like in and around like the graphic design community or see some of the posters that people are making online, it's probably using threshold in some way. It's going to make it really crunchy, crispy. It's quite fun, but there's a bunch of other ways to achieve this kind of effect. So I'll show you a couple different ones probably in the next video. So that's briefly going over some of those image adjustment tools that you can use if you would like to. Again, you don't need to really be employing those if some of the images you're finding are doing what you want them to do already. But if they're not, that's how you can kind of get them in control in a less editable way. The way to make it a little bit more editable would be to go to your layers panel and go down to the very bottom right here, this little sort of half circle inside a circle tool. If you click on that, you're going to see all the same wonderful things, but these would be on an adjustment layer instead. So I'm going to click the same sort of levels value here, and you'll notice it's going to shoot a second layer up here above the one I was just working on for the pairs that says levels. And when I have that levels layer selected, this is why it's important to have the properties panel open. When I have that levels layer selected in my properties panel, you'll see I have a handy dandy levels slider, just like the one that I pulled up through the image adjustments window up here. Except this time I can hop around, I can do a ton of things, turn things on and off, keep working on this file, and I can still click on that levels layer and it will continually be editable. So I can keep pushing and pulling this around. So I could drastically edit this, hop around, change things, do whatever I need to do, and then eventually I can decide, wait, that was way too much. I need to pull it back, and it's totally fine. It's still there. So those are adjustment layers. This little semicircle guy down here is going to have all of your adjustment layers in it. Um, and they're really fabulous to use. Every single one of these, you can keep editing the whole time you're working with them. But the same problem sort of arises as layer blend modes. It is going to affect every single layer underneath it. So if I take, again, my stickers and I drag them underneath this levels layer, you'll notice they immediately change because they're being affected by those levels indicators. What I want to do here is talk about how to get around that. So maybe you want to add something in that isn't going to affect everything, every single thing underneath it. Maybe I want this levels layer to just affect a singular element of this. You could, of course, start to reorder things, but maybe I actually want, say I'm adjusting this and pulling some of these guys around. Maybe I want these stickers to be underneath these pairs for my composition, but I still want to be able to either add this levels layer on top, or I want to be able to add this blend mode layer on top that I added earlier, and not have it affect these stickers underneath. Because remember when I first said this, I like this color scheme better than this one. So how can I make that actually work for me? It's kind of a dilemma. We're going to use something called clipping masks. Clipping masks are really great. You can use them to really fun effect. You can make cutouts from things. You can put like an image in your text, etc., etc. You can also use it to have certain things affect only the layer immediately underneath it. So there's two ways to impose a clipping mask. I'm going to show you both ways that I will use. They do the same exact thing. It's just depending on what shortcuts you like to use. So the first way I'm going to do this, and I'll impose it on both the levels layer and this sort of green fill layer here, is I'm going to go on my levels layer and I'm going to make sure that it is on top of the layer I want it affecting. I only want it affecting my pairs. And then I'm going to hold down the control key and click on that levels layer. And I am going to go very, very far down and hit create clipping mask. And this is going to chop this layer and have it only affect the pairs underneath it. You can see that from that little arrow icon underneath. And then I'm going to do the same exact thing to this layer that is sitting on top, my green fill layer. I'll do it a different method this time. Instead of hitting control click and using this menu, which you'll notice gives a lot of different options for layers, I am instead just going to hold down the option key, which I'm doing right now, and I'm going to move my cursor in between these two layers, and clipping masks can stack. So at the moment, I have my pairs layer, I have my levels layer that is clipped to the pairs, which basically means it's like following the shape of this layer. And I can just keep stacking this. I can make this layer follow the shape of this layer, which is following the shape of this layer, if that makes sense. All you need to know is they stack. So I'll hold down the option key and I will click in between these two layers. And now my fill layer is only affecting my pairs, my levels are only affecting my pairs, and these two are sitting beneath them still, but like blissfully unaffected by this, which is awesome. And that's exactly what we want. Um, and again, all of this, even with the clipping masks, all of this is still going to remain editable. The levels effects you can see pretty plainly and clearly based on the green fill layer on top of it, maybe a little bit more severely even than the original color. And then this, nicely now, I can sort of test out all these different colors and see how they react with pretty much no muss, no fuss. So I'm just going to double click on my color swatches down here to bring up my color picker, and we can play around with some of these fill layers and see how they affect stuff underneath. So this is a really quick way to kind of mess around with stuff, play with things, see what you like, hit undo a couple times, navigate back through it. And again, all of this stuff is still testable. So I'm not It's the really beautiful thing about Photoshop. I'm not locked into any of this while I'm still working on it. And I'm not like stuck with this even still. I can just still go and delete it, even with the clipping mask, doesn't matter. So that's going to be that kind of layering system here. The more layers you have, the more Photoshop really gets intimidating to people sometimes. So that's where I really like to start bringing in layer groups, which we talked about in our first video, just to make sure that I'm not getting too things aren't getting too cluttered. I'm not getting too confused by what layers are. This also brings to mind the fact that you can rename layers, which is quite important for organization. So even if these are the names of the actual images, download 3 is not exactly telling me what I have here. So I can just rename it. Double click on that and type in your name. And that's going to give me a little bit of a better idea as to what I'm doing. And I don't need that full title for the pairs. And so all of this now makes a little bit more sense. Adjustment layers have all of these different options in here. I'm going to go over a couple of these in our next video, things like gradients or your threshold again, gradient maps, or how to use some of these different ones. But all of these that are sitting neatly in the middle, from brightness, contrast down to your color lookup, are going to function exactly the same as the ones that are in your image panel under adjustments up top here. So they all function exactly the same way, same sliders. It's just going to, when you have the layer selected, give you the option of like continually editing them over time. Again, don't forget to save your Photoshop file so you can keep working in it. And we'll talk in the next video about a couple different fun ways to start editing your collages and working with them once you have all the photos placed and edited the way that you want. So that'll be it for this one. If you need a refresher on blend modes or want to see all of those different kinds of side-by-side comparisons, there is that presentation that will be on Canvas for you guys as well. See you in the next one.